the Hebrew versus the English Old Testament organization. This is pretty interesting. Most people don't know this, but the way that the original authors of Scripture organized the Old Testament is pretty different from how most of our English translations organize our Old Testament, which is a big deal because we've studied this so far in our network that one of the things that greatly impacts interpretation is the organization of the literature. So if the way that these guys organize the Old Testament is different from how we organize the Old Testament, we really should default their organization. So let me show you. I'm going to show you two pictures. I'm not sure if these pictures are going to translate. Can you guys see these at all? If you can't, that's fine. Okay, you can. Great. That's actually nice then. So if you'll look, this is how we organize scripture in our English Bible. So can one of you guys do me a favor and can you unmute and can you tell me in our English Bible, where do we have the book of Judges? Like which part of it's Pentateuch, history, wisdom, prophets? Where's the book of Judges?
History.
Yeah, history. So in our English Bible, we have that under the category of history, right? So how would that really impact our interpretation? Well, that would tell us, hey, we're probably reading the book of Judges because we want to study the history of Israel, right? Well, that's actually not where the original authors had it. So tell me on this one. So what we have here, this is the original Hebrew organization of the Old Testament. They kind of broke up the Old Testament into three major sections. So one was the Torah, and that's the law, right? That's the law. Next was the Nevi'im, that's the prophets. And then we had the Ketuvim, and that's the writings. And then they organized the books within those three categories, but let's keep it simple. Let's just stick, if we can learn those three categories, then that will be pretty exciting. The Torah is the law, the Nevi'im is the prophets, and the Ketuvim is the writings. All right, so tell me, in the original organization of the Old Testament, where is the book of Judges?
Nevi'im.
Yeah, it's in the Nevi'im, right? Which means that it's technically a prophetic book. Now that's really interesting because it is a lot of history, but when you actually start digging into the book of Judges, you realize that the purpose of the book of Judges is hardly to share a bunch of random historical facts. That it's actually a huge warning to the people of Israel and ultimately the people of God today about the corruption in our own hearts when we do what's right in our own eyes and when we don't cling to the king, right? So an illustration actually that my friend Michael always uses is, you guys remember after David kills Uriah and does all these terrible things, Nathan, the prophet, comes to David and he tells him a story. Do you guys remember the story? It's a story about a man who took a sheep, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then he turns around to David and David's like, "Oh, we got to take this guy out. Like this guy is a garbage person. He's the worst guy ever." And then Nathan turns to him and he says, "You're the man." So see, Nathan he told him a story, but that story had a purpose. That story was meant to lure David in, to get him realizing that there's a serious sin problem, and then all of a sudden to turn it and point it back at him and say, "This is you." Right? That is what a prophetic narrative does. So we see here that if the original authors actually put the book of Judges in a prophetic narrative category, as Bible teachers, that tells us exactly what we needed to be doing with this book. Right? So do you see how that greatly impacts interpretation? So why does this matter? Well, when we begin to realize how the original authors organized the books, it tells us how to teach those books because it tells us what they at least thought was the purpose of those books. So that's why the original organization matters. And we're going to be sending out that information so that you guys can keep that. So that's one of the first things I do when I'm studying a new book of the Bible. Is that one of the first questions I ask is, what's the context? And when I'm asking what is the literary context, the first question I ask is, where did the original author want this organized? Because if the original author didn't think it was a history book, he thought it was a prophetic book, then I'm going to go with his categorization of his book, not the one found in my English Bible. Hey, did you guys know that we have free stuff on our website, womenteachtheword.com? Like, we have a free Bible study and other stuff. And we're going to have a couple more free Bible studies coming out pretty soon. And it would make Fancy very happy if you would go check out our website. She's actually very rarely happy, so maybe it would help. See ya.